Welcome everybody to the session on designing and delivering service for youth on the move. Very excited for all of you to be here today. So today the session is really about the tension, the dilemma that we face in development when we're trying to design, not just for youth on the move, but just in general. There's this tension between what does the community need and then what are the restraints that we have, be it political, social, etc. So there's this constant back and forth that has an impact on the design itself. And so today's session is to give you a sense, like we're going to be talking about that tension. We're going to have some of our speakers talk about more like macro level, bird's eye view, but then specifically more like what does that look like in Bangladesh? But when we talk about the tension, we're going to even narrow it down a little more, because what happens is, as you're trying to design for youth in the move and you're thinking about your programming, etc., what happens is we have to adapt, because the situation is dynamic on the ground. Things are not static, so you have to be, nothing is static, so you have to change and adapt. And when that happens, we end up having to kind of learn and iterate as we go along. Well, we started with a plan, we did something changed, and we iterate. Now, this type of learning can be framed in different ways. How many of you see a duck here? Okay, how many see a rabbit first? Okay, but they're both there, right? But depending on how we see it, we can see that learning as a learning, or we can see it as a failing, right? And the thing is, if we see it as something where we failed, the issue with that is we begin to then address the fear of failing, the fear of failure. Now, it's not likely that most people here in this room, most people in general that are professional, that are successful, like all of us here, we don't really like talking about our failures. Because there's also like, what will people think about me if I show how I failed? There's this fear, this monster of failing. But yet we know that we can also reframe that failing as a lesson, as an opportunity. So for that, I wanted to help us to begin talking or thinking about failure, because the consequence, and the big consequence about not talking about our failures, is that we don't see what's behind the label. We don't see all the blood, sweat, and tears that took place before we have this beautiful, shiny success story, which we've heard many of, which is wonderful. But we rarely get to see behind it, what happened there? How was that process created? How many times did you fall down, but did you get it back up again? So that's why it's important to talk about failure. But we know it's hard. So to help us talk about failure, I also want to give us a framework that I think might be helpful to engage in this conversation. And this framework comes from a professor at Harvard. Her name is Amy Edmondson. She has an article on the HBR. And she basically says, not all failures are created equal. There's a spectrum. On this side of the spectrum, there's what she calls blameworthy failure. And this is where, you're purposely, consciously violating something. So you're like being mean and doing something inappropriate. Where perhaps you were being negligent and you didn't pay attention. You forgot to do something and something failed because of that. Or perhaps you didn't have the capacity or ability to, didn't recognize it, and then did it anyway and failed. But you can begin to see from that blameworthy failure, we begin then to go to more praiseworthy failure. And what does that look like? Perhaps the process is complex, and it requires a lot of practice to get it there. So you fail a little bit, but eventually you get it. There's uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen, so you have to adapt, and you fail along the way. Then there's hypothesis testing and exploratory testing. And when we talk about providing and delivering services for youth on the move in development, I would like to think that most of the failing, most of the time, tends to be on this praiseworthy side of things. Things are moving on the ground. We come in there with an idea, a suggestion, we hear the community, but then perhaps we try it and we're just testing because things are moving. Of course, there'll be some in this area, but I think today's session is really thinking about how do we think about the lessons learned in this praiseworthy failure that can really help us move forward for that. So to really help set the context, I'm going to invite first Pawan Kucita, the Chief of Education from UNICEF Bangladesh, to provide kind of the big context around what does this tension look like in development in general, not just in Bangladesh, but in general, what does it look like, that tension? And then we're going to have Sarah Jane Saltmarsh from BRAC talk about what does that look like specifically in a program that BRAC implemented here in Bangladesh. And then after that, we'll get a chance to go to your tables and do an activity with all of you. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic to Pawan.
Thank you, Andres. I think the tension that what Andres tried to, explain about this kinds of thing, I try to relate this to the intervention, the design and the intervention that UNICEF and also development partner are trying to provide education and skill for adolescents and young people. This is one of the areas that we have been trying our best, from the beginning, since before the influx, actually, the Rohingya people that are crossing the border to Cambodia, to Bangladesh is not new. So many years already they have been across, but the huge influx was after August 2017. And that was more than 700,000 people crossing the border. And 55% of them are children. These people, and what are their background? This is the area that we need to look at. And what was learning in the past in Rakhine State of Myanmar. And then now they are here. And they are under the host country of Bangladesh. So the next question is that, what is the curriculum for them to learn? This is huge problem, because from that side, they already have the problem of denied education, and their level of learning is so low. I can share with you some of the area where they have, this is the current response. I just showed you the current response. From the beginning, after 1 year, this is what we try to do. And we have reached quite a big number in terms of children from different age level. This is the area where we need to address the most, 15 to 24 years old. That we have done very little on that. And that because of, it doesn't mean we don't know. We know the issue, but it is not that easy to do. It's not, but what we can do is just to provide them some of the life skill training and what on that. So in terms of gap, to date, this is the bigger gap that I showed to you in that graph. And this is the area where we still have a long way to go in order to make sure all children get education. And from the Joint Response Plan last year, we planned for education sector alone about 47 million, and about 50% of that we have received from the international community to support this program. So compared to last August, you see that it increased a lot. It increased from 25% to 49% in terms of investment in here. And these are the challenges that I did mention a little bit. One is the standard of the curriculum. What kinds of curriculum that going to do for this? We don't have that. Population in this, another one, low level of education, lack of space. This is another big problem in the camp. Relatively small in terms of agencies that are working in the education sector right now. And that because the government here also, trying to screen the technical agency that can support education. And right now we have about 14 partners that are working in this. And that because of this kinds of permit, FD7, foreign aid donation, kinds of thing that the government of Bangladesh has to approve that one in order to access to program delivery for that. And this is what I want to share with you. Quite impressive that we are working BRAC with ACER agency from India, do a kind of assessment of the children that are already in the learning center. We can see the big tie of the children at this level of pre-primary only. So they don't have, and that because of generation, they don't have education for that. So that is why we are trying to do what we call learning competency framework and approach. This is the area that we are trying to do, and we have done that up to level 1 to level 5. Level 5 means up to grade equivalent to grade 10, from pre-primary to grade 10. This is the, right now we are doing that. And what needs to be done All of this, we need to do curriculum material, we need to do teacher training, we need to do all these kinds of learning center in order to deliver all of these kinds of things, which is a big investment. Big investments like a running education ministry. Currently, we do two-track approach. One is using the intermediary materials, which already completed on that. And then the second one, we are development of the material, for which BRAC is also one of the partners that are developing all subjects, except English. British Council is the one who is helping us to do the English at all levels for that. So in terms of youth, we know that this is the area that we have to do more. And what we try to looking for is for the youth, they need to have the foundational skill, they need to have the transferable skill or soft skill, and they need to have the specific skill for livelihood, for vocational training. These are the areas that we need to do. And we have planned to do all of these. These are the detail of kinds of skill. And we have the learning framework, we have the skill development framework, and we have the material that are being developed right now. Some of the life skills that already run in the camp right now with the agencies that are running, mainly they are talking on the soft skill, prevention of all of these kinds of youth issue, but not in terms of academic learning, not in terms of vocational training. That is not yet, and that's because of the sensitivity of the government also that are in discussion. I think this year is more flexible. They are, after election, it's more flexible that they are looking at kinds of skill for Rohingya to access to that. And that is why we start to initiate the process of livelihood skill or vocational skill training, which actually is already started. Some of the people that has been trained organize some kinds of job in the camp. This is activities that already done on that. So I think that's what I can share with you. In fact, we can discuss more in terms of detail of all of these kinds of things, but basically I would like to share with you that we learn from the failure. We learn from the tension. Every day is tension. Every day is problem solving for all of these in order to provide the education for the most deprived children that are crossing the border but we have a long way to go in order to help them to be able to not only empower themselves, but also become what we call a quality of human being, to repatriate to their own land, to their home country, or to reintegrate in wherever they go. We have to discuss a lot in terms of certification. That is another area that we are not touching on that yet, but we're already projecting on that. Who going to certify them? And who going to give them certificate? If they learn in a very academic year like this, academic competency like this, at the end of the day, we have to find a way to help them to be fully integrated to the world, and also helping them to be able to develop themselves in the society. Thank you.
And now I'd like to invite Sarah Jane up to speak to give us more of a, what BRAC's been doing, and then talk about this again, give us more context.
I think we'll start with a video, so I'll put that on first and then I'll speak.
আজকের আবহাওয়াটা খুব একটা ভালো না দেখতে পাচ্ছেন। এখন সবাই আবার বেরিয়ে পড়ছে প্রতিদিনের মতো। আমাদের প্রায় 350 লোক প্রতিদিন সকালে বিভিন্ন জায়গাতে ছড়িয়ে পড়ছে।
মাথাত কি গুলি মেরে দিবে
গুলি
একদম ধরি তিনবার।
এখানে আসার আগ পর্যন্ত আমি নিজেও বুঝতে পারি নাই আসলে কত বিশাল স্কেলে এই ভয়ঙ্কর মানবিক বিপর্যয়টা ঘটেছে। বিভিন্ন সংগঠন আছে, সেনাবাহিনী আছে, সরকার আছে, এবং প্রত্যেকেই যে দায়িত্বটা পালন করছেন তাদের ন্যূনতম চাহিদা মেটানো, এবং সেটাও করতে তাদের হিমশিম খেতে হচ্ছে। সেটা হচ্ছে তাদের দুবেলা খাবারের ব্যবস্থা করা, তাদের পয় নিষ্কাশনের ব্যবস্থা করা, তাদের পরিষ্কার পানির ব্যবস্থা করা। আমরা ব্র্যাক থেকে উদ্যোগ নিয়েছি যে 15,000 টয়লেট তৈরি করব আগামী অক্টোবরের 15 তারিখের মধ্যে। আমরা আরও 1,000 টিউবওয়েল বসাচ্ছি বিভিন্ন জায়গাতে, আমরা বিভিন্ন জায়গায় অলরেডি বসিয়ে ফেলেছি। এছাড়াও কিছু কিছু ইমার্জেন্সি অনেক বেশি জরুরি আকার ধারণ করছে, এর মধ্যে একটা হচ্ছে স্বাস্থ্য বিষয়ক ইমার্জেন্সি। দেখতে পাচ্ছেন বেশিরভাগ শিশুই খালি গায়ে আছে এবং ঠান্ডার সময় আসছে এবং তারা প্রচণ্ড কাশি আছে এদের মধ্যে, এবং এর মধ্যেই রান্নাবান্না হচ্ছে ঘরের মধ্যে, প্রচণ্ড ধোঁয়া বেরোচ্ছে, অনেক শিশু কিন্তু অসুস্থ হয়ে পড়ছে। প্রত্যেকের কিছু কাপড় চোপড় দরকার। আপনাদের যদি বাচ্চাদের কাপড় থাকে তাহলে সেই কাপড়গুলো আপনারা দিতে পারেন 6 বছরের নিচের বয়সের বাচ্চাদের জন্য। বিপুল সংখ্যক অ্যাডোলেসেন্ট গার্ল, তাদেরকে এখনও রিচই করা যায় না, তারা অনেক ঘরের মধ্যেই থাকছে, বেরোচ্ছে না, এবং তাদেরও কিছু কিছু সমস্যা আছে যেগুলো আমরা এখন অ্যাড্রেস করতে পারছি না। আমরা যদি কিছু চিকিৎসক পেতাম এখানে যারা কিনা বাড়ি বাড়ি গিয়ে অন দ্য স্পট ডায়াগনোসিস করবেন, রেফারেল করবেন, অনেক পরিবার এখানে আছে যারা মোবাইল ক্লিনিকে আসতে পারছেন না, তাদের কিছুটা উপায় হতো। রাতের বেলা এখানে পুরোটা বেশিরভাগই অন্ধকার হয়ে যায়। কিছু কিছু বাসায় সোলার ল্যাম্প আছে, কিন্তু এখানেও অ্যাফোর্ডেবল কিছু সলিউশন দরকার যেটা কিনা প্রত্যেক বাড়ি ব্যবহার করতে পারবে। এখানে আমরা অলরেডি খবর পাচ্ছি যে অনেক বাচ্চা হারিয়ে যাচ্ছে, কারণ এই সময়টা টিপিক্যালি যেটা হয় চাইল্ড ট্রাফিকারদের জন্য একটা খুব বুম টাইম। তারা এসে তারা এখানে তাদের সুযোগ খুঁজতে থাকে। তো এইটা মোকাবেলা করার জন্য অবশ্যই ল এনফোর্সাররা আছেন, কিন্তু এ ধরনের আলোর ব্যবস্থা করা জরুরি রাতের বেলা। আমরা যে সাপোর্টগুলো দিচ্ছি আমরা এগুলো তো দিতেই থাকবো, এবং আপনারা যদি কোনো ত্রাণের ব্যবস্থা করতে পারেন সেটা আমরা জায়গা মতো পৌঁছে দেওয়ার ব্যবস্থা করবো, এখানে নিয়ে আসতে পারবো। আপনারা যেখানে আছেন যেভাবে পারেন এই সাহায্যটা করা খুবই জরুরি, কারণ এটা একটা ন্যাশনাল ইমার্জেন্সি।
My name's Sarah Jane. Normally I work in communications. So normally I sit in Dhaka. My birthday is on the 25th of August, which means that it's exactly the same day that I was trekking actually in Teknaf, and I came out, I had a wonderful trek, and I walked out and the entire of the sea was on fire. So I'd never seen anything like that. The whole sea, it was like the entire ocean was on fire. It was actually the border of Myanmar which was on fire. So we were trekking just near there. And everyone was like, Agun, Agun. So in Bangla it means fire. So there's a lot of fire. And nobody knew what it was. At that time we had absolutely no idea. Nothing like this had happened before. It was my birthday, so I went back to Australia, and when I came back in 2 weeks, my boss at the time, who is in this video, said, you're going to Cox's Bazar, I don't know when you're going to be back. And so I spent 3 months there, and I've spent the best part of sort of the last 2 years in Cox's Bazar. And I wanted to share some of the failures and the learnings that we've had with working with young people there. BRAC even had seen nothing like 2/3 of Manhattan arriving on your doorstep overnight. We are a big organization. We have 110,000 employees plus, and we were all in there, jumping in there, trying to do something about this. So when we first stepped in, we're the biggest responder on the ground in Cox's Bazar. The first mistake that we sort of made is that we expected it, if we made a space and if we created a program, that people would come. So we created, in partnership with UNICEF, we created and a lot of other partners, we created child-friendly spaces, children came. Play labs, children came. We created women-friendly spaces, women came. We created adolescent spaces and nobody came. We also noticed that they were not coming to the other spaces. So it stopped at about, they came up to about 10 years old. 11 and upwards, nothing. And these were the same people that were obviously not in our learning centres, etc. So they weren't anywhere. So that was the first kind of mistake that we made. The second one that we made was we forgot about boys. So we were targeting these spaces at girls, and we assumed that that was what was most vulnerable. But actually what had happened is that the Rohingya society is extremely patriarchal. So these for young men, they'd not only experienced the same amount of trauma, but they'd been the ones that hadn't been able to protect their mothers, hadn't been able to protect their wives. They'd watched them being killed around them. So they had this extra level of trauma, and they were much less likely to come and get any of the counselling. So that was another thing. We sort of assumed that if we went to girls that would be enough, but it really wasn't. The third one was we were being a bit simplistic about their needs. So there was a lot of emotion, there was a lot of trauma. These people had seen more than any of us would see throughout our whole lives in sort of the last 2 weeks before they arrived. The fourth was that I think we often assume that adolescents are a universally homogenous group, so we assume that they have similar needs. They didn't at all. The broad strokes are similar, but the nitty-gritty was very different. So adolescents are usually, they're dealing with a whole lot of challenges with their peers, with their parents, with girls and boys, but there was a lot more tweaking to be done. So it's been a really big, it's been a huge learning curve for us over the last 2 years. What we're doing now is we are running girls' spaces, we're running them inside households, small groups, and we're concentrating on resilience, on self-esteem, and on psychosocial counselling for girls. We're training peer leaders and concentrating really hard on mental health, hoping that these girls can have future careers as para-counsellors, and we're, at the moment, they're being first referral points to get into our counselling services. Boys, we're concentrating on reducing violence and equitable access for men to violence services for survivors of violence. For them, we're concentrating on creating role models and getting men to speak out and getting them to spread positive messages about masculinity. In terms of what I was saying about homogeneity and simplicity, we've brought people in from around the world. We had people coming in from Jordan, Kenya, Greece. We had people coming in from our programs you would have heard yesterday from Tanzania, Uganda. So people around the world to realize the complexity of this situation. And as somebody who's been there for a good part of the last 2 years, you can really see that transformation is possible. So while there are a lot of, in some ways, kind of intractable problems, when you look people in the eye, you realize that transformation is possible. Girls will come up to you, they'll speak positively, they'll speak loudly, and they'll look you in the eye, which they never did before. When we first got there, nobody would do that. So, you know, we've taken this as an opportunity to transform this generation, which has this community which has been disenfranchised for generations. And if you look around the world, there's 68 million, I think is the current number that UNHCR gives, of people that are in situations of displacement that have been forced from our homes. That's one person, two people, I think one person every 2 seconds. So if we just think about that per day and we look at the last 2 days, I think that's it's almost 90,000 people that have been displaced just while we've been sitting at this forum. So it's crucial that we, that we take these as an opportunity to really make sure that we don't lose generations. And we've been able to see that if you put the work in, that you really can see change.
So we heard from Pawan and Sarah Jane some of the work that's been done here on education to work with youth in the camps, right? And we learned, Sarah's very clear, I appreciate, just listed out some of the things where they made some assumptions and then they tested them and they learned along the way. Technically they were failing, but sometimes if you had just heard what they're doing now, you wouldn't know that was the process, the non-linear process that got them to where they are today with the youth, etc. So we're going to then, for this part, actually going to go into your tables. Now, here's what's going to happen. Your tables are maybe 6 to 7 people. You're going to split in half. I want groups of 3 to 5, okay? So in groups of 3 to 5, I want you to think of a project that you worked on that you're proud of. Think of the blood, sweat, and tears that went into that and all the praiseworthy failings/learnings that you made along the way. And then as you're talking about this in your small group, try to identify what's a cross-cutting theme. As you're telling the story of the failings, what emerges as a cross-cutting theme between all your stories? It should be 1 or 2. These are the 1 or 2 things we would like for you to put into Slido. So in Slido, we would like for you to put in there the cross-cutting themes that emerge from your conversation. Okay? Any questions about the instructions so far? Okay. So, quick reminder, we're talking about praiseworthy failures, you know? The fact that when you're going and trying things out, you're experimenting, you're trying to address, kind of focus on this area, okay? And again, the idea is not to kind of say, oh, well, to assign blame, but like, what did we learn from that? But what are the failings? What did we learn from that? How did we move on? And as you're sharing this, we want you then to talk about that as a group. So again, these are the instructions. You have groups of 3 to 5. You have about 20 minutes to be able to have the conversation and make sure that your 1 or 2 cross-cutting themes are uploaded into Slido. All right, so get in groups of 3 and 5 and start the conversations. So start wrapping the conversations and make sure you're putting the lessons learned, the themes into your Slido. We already have about 8 or 9. You can actually read through them if you haven't already. And then what's going to happen is we're going to have then our panel respond to some of them and have a conversation back and forth. And if you see any that are particularly interesting as you read through them, just vote them up to see also, we can also prioritize them that way. As you go through the Slido and see them, you can vote them up. Alrighty. So I know we may not be finished, but at least we have enough to get started in the conversation. I'm going to ask Sarah Jane and Pawan to join up front. We'll have BRAC staff help us with the mics, because what we're going to do is just basically now, we're going to start reading some of these, and they're going to have a kind of, if you want to be back there, Sarah Jane, you can also just be back there. I'm sure you have a mic though. All right, everybody. So let's just kind of start here and see how far we can get, and just have Sarah Jane and Pawan as you read this, you know, so one is, you know, one of the themes or lessons learned was assuming that our intervention, usually technology related, would be inclusive and will work without testing first. So what are some responses as you see that, what are some responses you think about the work you've done and going forward?
Many things that we have tested, but the result was not promising, or even jeopardizing the end result. I pick up one example. From the beginning, we thought, you know, from the beginning, the education for Rohingya people, the new arrival would be the same like education for Rohingya that already arrived this country in the registered camp. You know that this country has 2 types of, in the registered camp, they learn ABAL, Accelerated Learning Program, ability-based accelerated learning program. It's like a catch-up program, which is using the Bangla curriculum from NCTB. But when we test that, we thought they are the same Rohingya, they should learn the same like that, without asking. But we try to do that together with the government, but it's not at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, right? So we tested only for 1 or 2 months. Then the reflection from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs came that no Bangla, no material, no textbook, no Bangla as a language for instruction. We go back to zero. And then we check with the Myanmar government, in Ministry of Education in Myanmar. Our representative met with the Myanmar minister and then discussed about this. And then they also not so happy to allow them to learn Myanmar materials. So you are in the limbo. So then we have to decide to help these children to learn. So what would be the curriculum for them to learn? We couldn't even get the point of having a real curriculum. But we have to make sure that the children should come and learn in an organized way. So we do what we call a learning framework, a competency-based learning framework, using a global learning metric. And then that also align with both Myanmar curriculum and also align with Bangladesh curriculum. And using 2 languages for instruction, and that is English and Myanmar. So no Bangla, that's okay. No Myanmar, never mind, because that side, these people are all here. We advocate for Myanmar because we know that our people from Myanmar, education specialists, advise to us that they have to be mastery in Myanmar in order to reintegrate in education in Myanmar upon return, upon repatriation. So that means qualify them to go. Then the whole structure of development of the materials and what we are doing in that way now. Okay. And that's what we try to do. But before that, it was the whole struggling, the whole struggling of that. And that is why we are doing not only UNICEF alone, but doing as a sector, the whole education community now. Using this, and we are preparing these kinds of learning curriculum and submit this to the government of Bangladesh as a host country, and they are reviewing it now.
Okay.
So we hope we can move on for that.
One question I have for the FESA, the group that wrote that, could you just raise your hands? If you could tell, when you said usually technology related, can you just in a minute kind of say what you're referring to, and then maybe perhaps Sarah Jane can also respond to that. Here's a mic.
We just talked about how there's like sort of a current trend to think that we can alleviate a lot of issues related to poverty and inequity with technology and app and a quick fix like that developers can just make and do. But we all had projects, didn't even have access to the technology that we were developing our intervention, like a cell phone, like a smartphone, or so many different cases. Like Bonita was talking about how her current, she started off with something related to that too, and then realized that again, most of Nepal, same issue, but then that's why she went with her model with the bracelets, where you can disseminate knowledge like that. So I think it's like coming out of like thinking of it in a bigger picture context, thinking of it in a, but thinking of it in like specific socioeconomic targets that you're trying to reach, and not just going by the like what's the trend, industry trend. Yeah.
One of the point that we try also in the camp by using some kinds of technology. We thought that could work, but then when we look at in terms of accessibility of the device, even the SIM card, they are not allowed. They are not allowed to have the SIM card. But we know that in the camp, everybody has a cell phone. And that is something that, some of them maybe carry from that side. We don't know. You can see that people, when they cross the border, one thing that they carry with them is solar panel to recharge their battery of the cell phone. They come with the cell phone. So we thought they can use that one. But then when we discuss about these kinds of things, it is not that easy. And then we try to find a solution. Can we do the offline? Have the iPad and what? That's what Save the Children is trying to do. Plan International is trying to do. But those are the offline things. If they can do that, fine. But we have to find the way on how we can aid the process of learning. The key point here is how to help them learn. We can't just run the same like what we run in the regular situation. Printing textbook. In this country, printing textbook is about 20 million books per year. Rohingya cannot do like that. No money. I don't think that will be a big investment. And how can we do that? But if we can do that offline in a tablet, then you have the e-book, like that. Then they can read. But they need to have the basic foundation, basic agreement before accessing to that.
Thank you. Sarah Jane, I'm asking you, as you see some of these themes, 2 or 3 or the one below, is there one that just jumps out at you that you want to comment on as far as makes you think about the work that you're doing at BRAC?
Yeah, I think the third one is particularly relevant to BRAC. So the first one was also amusing. I was just thinking when Faiza was speaking about the time that we implemented a mobile money solution, and we walked into the village a couple of weeks later to find women pulling the phones apart to look for the money inside the phone. And we sort of realized at that point that we may have overestimated the capacity of the women and their basic understanding about what mobile money was. But I think when you have a lot of ideas and solutions and projects, I think I'd speak about it from the opposite direction. Obviously, it's easy to speak about that as a large organization, but the way that BRAC was created and the way that we continue to run, even in our smaller wings, is that you find some challenge that you want to solve, and then you realize that it takes something else, and it takes something else to do that, and you end up, so that's kind of how all of our projects run, is you start with one thing and then you add on to it as you see new needs, because you generally can't go in and solve one problem. It relies on a ton of other things. So I think sometimes those interdependencies are also something that we don't pay attention to. One of the things that we try a lot to do as an organization is to look for partners in those. So if you see an interdependency, so it's where the sector is going in general.
I'm curious, as you see some of these flash up, are you surprised by any of these in the tables? Like, are some of them like, wow, this something? Was anybody surprised by the themes that emerged? Or there were these things that like, hey, we kind of know about this. It happens. I'm curious to get a sense of the room for the lessons learned that emerged. Were you surprised by any of them, or were these like, not really? What are some responses from people?
From individual level, it doesn't surprise me that what I wrote was actually happening. But what surprises me is that almost everybody has the same, input over here. Mm-hmm. They're writing that something you prepare your proposal with, but the outcomes are coming completely different. Mm-hmm. So,
what we also said that the pace of emergencies moves so fast that we jump up with certain things rather than doing a very thorough, concrete rights analysis, that children, adolescents, and youth rights analysis in the camp settings. That what is the exact need and rights issues. Not comparing that who is doing what is the different other competency that we have at the local level, at the national level, how we can really do the right-based programming. That's often we cannot think of that. So this is one of the limitations that's putting all of us together in the same lessons.
Wonderful. So I've been told we have to actually start wrapping up the session because our guest of honor is here on the other side. So we have basically 5 minutes. And in those 5 minutes, I want to ask basically to just hear from the audience about like, what was this experience like to talk about your failings with perhaps your colleagues or perhaps new people you just met? What was it like to open up about when you messed up, in that sense? What were some of the things that, what was easy or what was hard about that for you? I really appreciate that because I think as we were thinking about the design of the session too, we did also want to open up, a can of worms and just have to close really quickly because I think it can be quite hard to talk about failure in general, but I think you're right. I think in some cases it's easier, at least for the most part. Did somebody have an opposite reaction though? Did somebody find it really hard to talk about failing even though it was something you were proud of? I see kind of some hands over here.
You said something proud of but hard to find the failure. That happened when I was thinking about what should I add? Like, yes.
No, I think we're very proud of that UNICEF Save Your Children with the funding from Education Cannot Wait have 200 learning centers in Cox's Bazar. We really feel we failed that when Lego gave Sesame Street and BRAC $100 million that went to the kind of same thing, that we didn't manage to actually maybe tap into some of that, because we actually don't know exactly how these 200 learning centers will be sustained, and the quality of them are really to be proud of, I have to say. So we kind of, I don't know if we didn't showcase well enough, we didn't have the right friends, but it's, and the funding is, Lego is Danish, so it just was really came as a surprise to us that they hadn't even asked us, because we are actually implementing 200 there. So yeah, for us it is a failure. We hope we can learn from BRAC. Maybe they can give us some tips of how to get $100 million, which is quite a lot.
Thank you. Well, we're going to have to finish. I don't know if Sarah Jane and Pawan, just some brief closing comments before we head out when we close the session.
Yeah. Don't worry about the missing of that ECW1. We still have ECW2, ECW3, or Global Partnership for Education 1, Global Partnership for Education 2. I think lots of financing facility opportunities around. But we need to continue to demonstrate, to advocate, our work that we are proud of. It is real benefit to the children, and that is speak itself, speak itself to the donor community or to the private sector. There's lots of options here, particularly in Bangladesh. One of the options is the Islamic Development Bank from Saudi Arabia is here, and Bangladesh is member of the Islamic Development Bank, and a member is non-limit. For non-member, only 200,000. Pitch.
So that's a resource that's
available. Yeah, a resource is available.
Okay.
And they have the office here in Bangladesh, in Dhaka. I think that is option that we can continue to advocate. I think if we do good thing, definitely many people want to chip into that, to support that. And more, I would say that one cannot do alone. Even practitioner alone or financial alone, we need a joint hand. We need collaboration. We need the partnership. Partnership is key for scaling up of this opportunity for the young people. And that is something that we can do more.
Thank you, Pawan. Sarah Jane, some brief comments to close.
Not very much, just to say thank you for listening. It's always, I always enjoy sharing the story of the last couple of years, and I think that in general we can share a lot more failure stories. We recently published one of our first failure reports at BRAC, and well, I would say it went down really well externally. It was a bit of a shock to some people internally. But we're really looking forward as an organization to do a lot more of reporting, and also in the same vein as what Pawan is saying, that I think within those collaborations, they're not just traditional sort of, financing collaborations, but often learning and sharing ones. And there's a lot we can say and we've been operating for quite some time, so there's plenty that we can share, and I think there's a lot more we can all get as a sector out of sharing failures and being humble about them.
And that's what's so important. The more we share this, the more we realize how absurd it is that we're still making the same mistakes year after year, the more it becomes very painful to do that, and then we can change them about it. And then we can create spaces to actually talk about the failures perhaps that are more difficult to talk about. So on that note, let's give a hand to our panelists. So we can